Okay, welcome back to Razor Sharp Report, Bold Like a Leopard. I want to encourage you to look at the link below. It is a link tree, and it has all of my accounts: Truth Social, Rumble, Bitchute, Odysee, Substack, Telegram, Gettr, Podbean, Subscribestar, Minds, Gab, and YouTube. And while I'm not very active on all of them, if you subscribe, uh, usually I follow back. And we're going to get into today's topic. I wrote this article and was published this week concerning foreign fighters in Ukraine, concerning the increasingly obvious quagmire in Ukraine. And it actually took me a while because I started researching the issue of foreign fighters, I think, all the way back in May or June. And the situation hasn't gone quite as bad as I thought it would. Look, there's people who are always going to be looking for adventure and action overseas because that's the type of personality that they are. And while some people may laugh at them and make fun of them that they befall misfortune in a war overseas, I don't think it's really a laughing matter when people go to a war on behalf of a foreign government and they risk a lot because they don't necessarily have people in the country that they are supposedly fighting on behalf of to represent them, right? I personally have a little bit of experience in this. It's not quite the same thing, but my family's Israeli. I went to volunteer. Uh, well, technically, it wasn't volunteering. I was legally obligated to go to the army over there because my parents were Israeli. So I did. I did when I was 19, and it wasn't a great experience. It was 2.5 years, and there are many points when you start to believe that the people that command you don't have your best interests at heart. This is besides any political considerations. So if anybody wants to chime in with their own political stance on military service, wherever it may be, whether in Israel or the U.S. or Russia for that matter, I don't care. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about whether people have representation to defend their rights. And when you go and volunteer as a mercenary, essentially, for the Ukrainian government, you're not entitled to any defense. It's really just a pathetic situation if you run afoul of the people that are in charge of you. That you're basically cannon fodder. There are people who are promoting these mercenaries as real heroes, and let me tell you something. They may be doing heroic acts, but the result of what they're going to do is anything but heroic. Ukraine is simply losing the war. It's not to say that they deserve to lose, although you could make the argument for that. They're not strategically winning the war either. The best strategy for winning this war in Ukraine's corner would have been to never have it happen at all, and that's already passed. So they're in a lose-lose situation. What should they have done? Try to find a way to negotiate with the Russians as soon as they could and minimize the damage, and maybe find a way to be on unfortunately, better terms with a country that's abusing them. And that's not really an easy situation to put them in. But having Ukraine be in a neutral position where they're not part of NATO, they're not part of the European Union, but they're also not part of Russia, that was a proposal that's been on the table for years. And nobody's really um, addressing the fact that it's still on the table, but we've already gone through so much blood and wasted so many people's lives and so many financial and physical resources and armaments that it wouldn't be practical to do it. Or actually, it would be practical to do it. It wouldn't resonate with the people because they've already been riled up into this frenzy that this has to be some sort of um, righteous cause to fight off Russia, as if that's going to make the war more winnable. That just isn't the case. Unfortunately, Russia is better armed, better trained, and more resourced, and that's what's going to happen. So there are people like Malcolm Nance that have made hay over this. Malcolm Nance actually went to Ukraine and made a big show of how he is volunteering for the Ukrainian people, and we can actually see it in
Ali Aruzi,
this
please.
clip. You may have remembered it from earlier this year.
Please be safe, my friend. Really appreciate you in Lviv. Much appreciated. And joining me now from a secure location in Western Ukraine is Malcolm Nance, Executive Director of the Terror Asymmetrics Project. He is fighting with the International Legion of Territorial Defense of Ukraine. And Malcolm, we just watched that video of you, and Ali Arouzi was attempting to interview you for us to get more information on what you're doing. We saw those cruise missiles fly overhead. So explain to us why you are there and what you are doing.
Well, as you know, I spent quite a bit of time here in the pre-war period. And when the invasion happened, I had friends who were in Donetsk, who were in the Ukrainian army, who were writing to us and telling us, we're not going to survive tonight. We've been hit 500 times. These are graduates at Defense Language Institute. These were my friends. And, as the more I saw of the war going on, the more I thought, I'm done talking. All right. It's time to take action here. So about a month ago, I joined the International Legion here in Ukraine, and I am here to help this country fight, what essentially is a war of extermination. This is an existential war, and Russia has bought it to these people, and they are mass murdering civilians. And there are people here like me who are here to do something about it.
And we have some video here. This is some video that was shot by Ali's team of yourself with some supplies and the things that you are working on while you're there. We know there are about 20,000 people.
So notice he's in full battle gear, but what's he doing? He's in an office on a computer in Ukraine. And by the way, so
from 52 guys and the things that you...
So the place where he was located was Lviv, which is the western part of Ukraine. It's nowhere near a combat zone. So what MSNBC was basically doing, and I wouldn't care if it was any network. Fox has done plenty of war propaganda too. They are marketing this war to Western, Western people, and telling them, yeah, you can go to Ukraine. This is important enough. There's a war of extermination. They're saying that the Russians are fighting to destroy everything that's left of the Ukrainian people, which is, it's simply not true. The Russians are absolutely brutalizing Ukraine, destroying its infrastructure, leveling it. There's no two ways about it. To say that what Russia's doing, first of all, is illegal, and second of all, that they are, just trampling over all of the Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and killing many of the people. They're not deliberately exterminating them. And that's where I think you have to differentiate between war propaganda and accurately reporting what Russia is doing to Ukraine. Look, I think Russia is going to win the war. Does it mean that I want them to win the war? Not really, because there's no benefit that anyone gets from Russia being in a stronger position vis-a-vis Ukraine. Not that anybody here gets, right? So this situation has made it difficult to be a good critic and person analyzing the war situation, because automatically you're characterized as a person who is sympathetic to the Kremlin. That's simply not the truth. I wish that the war hadn't happened. Obviously, Putin saw an opportunity, took advantage of the opportunity, has completely done away with any conventions that people had in mind that were preventing them from invading Ukraine. Because for the most part, since World War II, nations haven't invaded one another within Europe, right? But there are exceptions. There was the invasion of Czechoslovakia by the Russians in 1968, by the Soviets, more accurately. That was an invasion. Now, it was an invasion of a Soviet satellite by the Soviet Union, but it was an invasion nonetheless. In the 1956 of Hungary, similar situation. So for people to characterize this as some thing that was totally unexpected and that they were breaking all of the norms is just delusional. And I'll tell you another thing. So Malcolm Nance has now he said in that clip that he was done talking, and then he went on this other show later and starts talking to Zerlina Maxwell and he was done.
Let's get
He was done not talking. Like he was done talking, and now he's talking again. So this is what he said then.
into the hearings first to start off, because yesterday's hearings, actually aptly timed with the release of your book, gave us a lot of the warnings you've made throughout in this book, but also your previous books, about the threat posed by white nationalists and extremist groups, specifically to American democracy. Lay that out for us.
Yeah, well, as a terrorism expert, I usually remove phrases like Muslim or Christian or Catholic or white when I'm talking about extremists. Most extremists have an ideology that they're following. But here in the United States, to characterize that, to understand just what kind of terrorism we might be dealing with, you have to actually label it according to as white extremism, because we have 30% of the population of the United States who no longer believe in the democratic norms that were established at the founding of the country.
So pausing there, I don't know if we have to get through anything else he says, but um, it is in the article, and I'll put the article in the chat, in the description, so you can read it and you can go to this video. But what he says is basically that normally his standard is that when you're talking about extremist groups abroad, he doesn't characterize an extremist terrorist group as a Muslim extremist terrorist group or the Christian terrorist extremist group in a foreign country, right? But in America, he does feel like you need to name the Trump MAGA movement extremists, and at that to be white extremists. Never mind the fact that a lot of the people who he's talking about that were wrapped up in the whole January 6th saga are not white. Enrique Tarrio and the Proud Boys, many of them are Latino. Ali Alexander is black. This is the real problem that we're having today, that I read about in this article, that you have a person who is deeply dishonest. So I'll try to tally all of them. Sometimes I don't have the most organized thoughts in real time while I'm recording these videos. But on the one hand, encouraging people to take up arms in the name of a foreign government in Ukraine, calling it a new crusade. Then also saying later, after he's back from this war, that supposedly he's done talking, he's all action, now he's back to talking, and he's selling his book. And then he's telling you that extremist groups abroad, you don't have to call them by what their beliefs are, Islamic terrorism or whatever it might be. It might be Irish republicanism. It might be, there was Basque separatism and all that. He says that's not necessary over there, because as a terrorism analyst, he doesn't feel that really is a good way to characterize these groups. But in America, it is a good way, because and at that you must describe it as white supremacist extremism, even though many of the people are not white and they're not white supremacists, and they have no connection to bona fide white supremacy, white supremacist ideology. And that's really the type of person that you'll find on MSNBC. I don't think I'm refreshing anything. I'm not really giving you anything new if you're somebody who's watched this channel before. But yeah, Malcolm Nance was one of the most dishonest people that's ever put in front of a TV camera. He is a naked propagandist, telling people that he's gone to war when he isn't even close to the war zone. Lviv, I'll show you where Lviv is. It's pretty. So you go to Google Maps, right? And I don't know why it's only half of the. So you should be able to see Ukraine. Lviv. This is where the war zone is. Sorry about the dog. The war zone is over here. Lviv is all the way on the other end of the country. It's almost at the Polish border. In fact, Lviv once was part of Poland. So that's something that people need to bear in mind, that when they tell you things on the TV, they don't have a map in front of you of where they are. And Malcolm Nance is one of the most dishonest people that they put on TV. Why? Because he's meant to be dishonest on TV. I don't know what my dog is barking at. Anyway, so Nance has compared the modern American right to terrorist insurgencies in Syria and Libya. Well, what were those terrorist insurgencies about? They were about Islamism. They were about establishing a caliphate. He is directly comparing the other Americans to Al Qaeda and similar groups. Similarly, this is something that actually dropped recently. So Dean Al-Baydallah, a CNN contributor, a very far left CNN contributor, also did something like this. He said, I quote, literally view Trump supporters as no different than bin Laden supporters. Literally meaning that he believes that this. So sorry, but I had to stop for a second. This is a second cut. But what I was talking about before I was really interrupted by my dog was that there was a frequent CNN columnist who this week, Dean Al-Baydallah, said, I literally view Trump supporters as no different than bin Laden supporters. That is a pretty scary take. Now, look, during the real heart of the war on terror, the 2000s, there were a number of Democrats who were basically cheerleading for for the Bush administration to fail overseas. Now, I don't group them in with people who were simply pro-war, or sorry, anti-war, people who opposed the war in Iraq, people who opposed even the war in Afghanistan. There were people who were literally uh, saying that it's the America's fault that the Twin Towers went down. And look, I'm a First Amendment absolutist. If people want to say that, they can say that. It's pretty it's I think it's in poor taste, but I've heard perspectives of it. I am a supporter of the Ron Paul movement. Ron Paul has made points that the United States brought upon itself a lot of the blowback from overseas, but he wasn't saying that the U.S. deserved for the 9/11 attacks to happen. However, Dino Bedalla says at this point, I literally view people who still support Donald Trump no different than the despicable, vile people who supported bin Laden after 9/11. That same morning, Obidala tweeted that the January 6th Capitol riot was a, quote, terrorist attack incited by Trump, asking how soulless are GOP candidates they actually fight to get the endorsement of Donald Trump, a man who waged a coup and incited the January 6th terrorist attack. Obidala has also compared Republican lawmakers to other terror groups in the Middle East, with his busy Twitter morning featuring his classic take that the GOP is much like the Taliban. Um, so and then it references the exact same issue that I was talking about with Malcolm Nance. It says another MSNBC contributor and talk show guest has made similar claims in recent weeks. Author Malcolm Nance told MSNBC host Erlena Maxwell last month that the GOP has harbored a terrorist Trump-supporting insurgency looking to kill its American neighbors. In addition to comparing Trump voters and the GOP to terrorists, Obedala has frequently referred to the Republican Party as a fascist movement. He found time Thursday to tweet that as well. Now, so I want to pivot back for a second to the people who actually go and sorry about that. Somebody was trying to call me, but the people who actually are trying to um, go and volunteer in Ukraine, there have been several people who have gone and died. One of them is Steven Zabelski, an American, right? He died in May, I believe. So, or sorry, in June. He was 52 years old. He was killed May 15th in the village of Dorozhnyanka in Zaporizhia Oblast. An oblast is simply a Ukrainian and Russian word for region. According to an obituary that was published in the upstate New York newspaper The Recorder, his death was confirmed by the State Department on Tuesday. The department declined to provide further details about the circumstances surrounding his death, saying, out of respect to the family during this difficult time, we have nothing further. But a comrade said Zabelski, a U.S. war veteran turned construction worker, died after stepping on a landmine, Rolling Stone reported. Tristan Nettles, a U.S. Marine veteran who was with Zabelski the night he died, told the magazine that the 52-year-old and one of his comrades were on a mission to clear mines ahead of a planned Ukrainian offensive when he accidentally touched a tripwire hidden in thick vegetation in foggy conditions. So this is no laughing matter. What Malcolm Nance is doing when he promotes Americans going overseas to fight in Ukraine could end up getting people killed. Today, Alex Jones was held liable for false claims that he made about Sandy Hook, that he's apologized since, regarding retrospective comments about whether Sandy Hook actually happened, and crisis actors, and he was an idiot back then. But he didn't cause anybody to die. What Malcolm Nance is actually encouraging people to do by going to volunteer in Ukraine could end up costing people's lives. It has cost people lives, not necessarily directly connected to what he said, but to efforts to get Americans and other Westerners to volunteer there. In April, upstate New York native Willie Cancel was killed in combat. Okay, that was before, I believe, Nance actually went on air and made the whole charade that he's fighting in Lviv. That's not really a fight. If you're all the way back behind the lines, what exactly is your fighting role? You're a propagandist. That's what you are, Malcolm Nance. And most recently, two Americans, Luke Lukishin and Brian Young, were killed along with two other volunteers from Canada and Sweden in the Donetsk region. Two Americans were captured fighting in Ukraine in June, along with a third in July. They could all be sentenced to death, alongside three British and Moroccan fighters already tried by Russian-controlled Donetsk People's Republic. Earlier this month, two more British volunteers, Andrew Hill and Dylan Healy, were charged with similar offenses after being captured. Another Briton, Paul Urey, was revealed to have died in DPR captivity, Donetsk People's Republic, although it is not confirmed that he was an actual combatant. And then I go into this other issue. The reason that you're not hearing so much about these people is that if anybody is being focused on in terms of captivity in Russia, it's Brittany Griner. And Brittany Griner was actually, so I wrote this a little while ago, but Brittany Griner was sentenced just this, I think it was this morning in Russia. So it was the evening over there, to 9 years in prison. It might have been yesterday. And the truth is, I feel for the Griners and her wife or whatever. Nobody wants their loved one to be held overseas, even if it's for in her case, she confessed to the crime, right? But the truth is that Brittany Griner committed a stupid mistake that is not any better or worse than what these guys who fell into Ukrainian captivity as combatants in Ukraine did. And the difference that I want to make clear here is that the United States has not done much to discourage American citizens from going overseas to risk their lives and their freedom, potentially, to fight in this war between Russia and Ukraine. Look, I feel that the position of advocating against war, the position for calling for diplomacy, it's a cause that is never going to really get you any thanks. It's something that when Jesse Jackson, somebody who I've never really admired, I do give him credit. He would go to war zones like Serbia, and I believe he also went to Libya one time, and he would get American hostages released. Does that make me like him as a person? No. Does that make him does that mean he deserves some credit for a job well done? Absolutely. As bad as Jesse Jackson is, as corrupt of a person as he is, you have to give him credit for doing things that many people, they don't have the guts and the courage to do. You can still criticize them for the other things that they did. A case that I brought up was that of Daniel Gerhardt, a Maryland-born husband, father, and Vietnam veteran who ventured to Angola in 1976 as a soldier of fortune to fight for the anti-communist FNLA guerrilla group. Rushed into service for a small outfit of foreign fighters, Gerhardt's commander was a Cyprus-born veteran of the British paratroopers named Kostas Georgiou, better known as Colonel Callan. Let me see if I can find a clip of him. So this was, I think the only thing that's left is this. There's some clips of him when he was in captivity.
Callan came in, and it seemed to set him apart even more from the other 12 accused. It followed previous incidents in the dock when he had seemed to chide and threaten some of the others. The same morning, the fourth day of the trial, Callan had turned down the offer of a British lawyer, preferring his Angolan, Maria Teresina Lopez, who, by common consent, has handled a difficult case with great skill. At the start of the session, the presiding judge explained why the handcuffs were necessary.
That Cullen must attend the court with handcuffs on because of his undisciplined activity. And because he might choose to do something unexpected.
First to give evidence that day was the injured Gustavo Grillo, Argentinian-born but a former U.S. Marine. He'd also once been bodyguard to a New Jersey racketeer with mafia connections.
Defendant Grillo, what is your name?
My name is Gustavo Marcelo Grillo.
After evidence of identification, the cameras, as usual, had to leave. But Grillo was to go on, under gentle and sympathetic questioning, to reveal himself as the star witness. He condemned the British and American governments, the CIA, his fellow mercenaries.
So that's really, I'm going to set up what happened. In 1975, Angola got independence. The government that took power was a pro-Soviet one. There was a pro-Western guerrilla group that hired mercenaries. They were called the National Front for the Liberation of Angola, the FNLA in their Portuguese initials. The person that they hired, who eventually became the most well-known one, Georgiou, or as he was better known, Colonel Callan, was a fearless and very daring fighter. He was basically, in many cases, like just mowing down these Angolan troops who were very poorly disciplined. Many of them were raw conscripts, and he'd had experience because he was a British paratrooper. But they quickly got wise, and they brought in their own help from Cuba. And with the Cuban help, much more experienced, much better armed, they ambushed him, and they captured him and another, I believe it was 13 soldiers or mercenaries, and they all stood trial, and eventually 4 of them were put to death, including him. One of the other people put to death was Daniel Gerhardt, who was the only American who was put to death. I think there were 2 other Americans who served there who were, they went through horrific prison terms. They didn't get any reward from it. Daniel Gerhardt, who was a Vietnam veteran, returned home to virtually first of all, he returned home in a casket. And second of all, nobody gives you any credit for fighting in a war in a third world country on behalf of a lost cause. So I think that the responsibility for what's going on here, you have other people like Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who has put up this article on Foreign Affairs called Build Ukraine Back Better. They're calling for America to shoulder the debt of Ukraine, bail it out with almost $750 billion in reconstruction money. They're telling Americans, we've supported Ukraine throughout the war. We've given them tens of billions of dollars already. Today, we signed another $1 billion military aid package to Ukraine that most Americans don't hear about, they don't care about, because they're already conditioned to know that we're supporting Ukraine and we're just going to hand them the money. And yet, they want more. And what does Lieutenant Colonel Vindman say? It says, it remains unclear how long the war will last, but what is clear is that this war will end with a Russian defeat and a sovereign and independent Ukraine emerging as a new European power. There's no way that you can call a country that has its hand out for hundreds of billions of dollars of aid and reconstruction money and call them a power. They are a pauper. They are out there calling for America to shoulder their burden. And we are calling on them to send their sons and daughters to war and die in order to, defeat Russia, make Russia weaker. It's not going to work. And that's why I wrote this piece. I think that the American and Western volunteers who have gone there, some of them have already been killed. Many of them have probably been injured that we don't know about. Some of them have been captured, and they're going to be either put to death or held as hostages. It's time for Americans to actually stand up, talk about this issue, discourage people from going and sacrificing their lives for this fruitless effort in a foreign country that ultimately we can't determine their destiny. So that's about it. I want to encourage you again, go to the link tree. I'm on Truth Social, Rumble, Bitchute, Odysee, Substack, Telegram, Gettr, Podbean, Subscribe, Star, Minds, Gab, and YouTube. And I hope to see you in any of those places or all of those places Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you later.